Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Project-Based Learning as a Vehicle for High-Impact Practices, Reinventing Institutions. This is the third webinar in a series hosted by Worcester Polytechnic Institute and its Center for Project-Based Learning, or CPBL, in conjunction with the Chronicle of Higher Education. I'm Michael Lamft, the Chronicle contributing editor, and I'll moderate today's discussion. In the first webinar in this series, held last November, we discussed how project-based learning, or PBL, as you'll hear it referred to often today, is an effective way to integrate high-impact practices into the classroom by changing the pedagogy faculty use in their individual courses. The second webinar, held in February, focused on programmatic change, how PBL can be used to enhance programs in majors, in general educations, in the first year, etc. Today's webinar is about how institutions can build a culture of support for PBL. Through the CPBL, Worcester has collaborated with many institutions looking to promote and support project-based learning. Today, you will hear from two such institutions and their champions for project-based learning. First, Kim Filer is the Associate Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning and the Director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at Virginia Tech. She leads faculty support efforts there associated with curriculum design, course design, learner-centered instructional strategies, and the scholarship of teaching and learning. Welcome, Kim. We're also joined by Margaret Shippey, the Director of Faculty Development and Classroom Engagement at Miami-Dade College, multi-campus state college in South Florida that is among the largest undergraduate institutions in the United States. Margaret works with faculty groups to explore and examine educational development topics such as project-based learning and open educational resources, with the goal of bringing these topics to MDC's faculty college-wide in a meaningful and relevant way. Welcome, Margaret. We'll also be hearing from Rick Vaz, who in 2016 founded the Center for Project-Based Learning at Worcester Polytech Institute, or WPI, where he's a professor of integrative and global studies, widely recognized as an expert in the development and implementation of project-based learning courses and curricula. Vaz now serves as a senior fellow for the center, supporting the center's list of higher education clients who seek to expand their use of PBL as a high impact practice. Hello again, Rick, and good to see you again.
Thanks, Mike. We're all happy to be here with you today.
Before we get started, I want to alert our audience that our panelists will be answering your questions at the end of the webinar. So please feel free to send questions along using the Q&A box on your Zoom panel at any point during the presentation. We may not get to all the questions today, so if you would, add your email address to the question so our panelists can answer them later if needs be. So let's get to it, starting with Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Rick, today we're going to be discussing how colleges and universities can encourage and support the use of project-based learning across campus. And it's kind of an interesting time to talk about this, given that campuses are in flux. I know that's not going to be the point of what we talk about today, but I'm sure we'll touch on that. WPI has had 50 years to develop mechanisms to support project-based learning. Can you briefly review the scope of project-based learning at WPI?
Sure, Mike. This slide shares some basic information about WPI, but I guess what I'd like to call everyone's attention to is the final bullet. In 1970, WPI replaced a very traditional curriculum that consisted mostly of required courses with a highly flexible program called the WPI Plan. And under the WPI Plan, graduation requires successful completion of 3 project experiences. One in the humanities and arts, one that's interdisciplinary, and one that's a project in the student's major. And a few details have changed in the plan since 1970, but those 3 requirements are still intact. This year, we celebrated 50 years of the WPI plan, and in that time, we've further expanded the role of project-based learning in the curriculum. Can I have the next slide, please? So in the first year, Students can participate in a 6-credit Great Problem Seminar organized around a significant global challenge. Examples are energy, the environment, sustainable food systems, and public health. Students consider those problems from different disciplinary perspectives and then work in small teams to explore a particular instance of the problem and propose solutions. All students complete an 18-credit sequence focusing on a particular area of the humanities and arts, sort of like a minor. And that usually culminates in the second year with a 3-credit seminar or practicum, where students tie together their previous studies in the area with some original work, which could be a research project or a creative piece. In the third year, all students complete a 9-credit-hour interdisciplinary project that's not related to their major. Students work in small teams to address problems posed by NGOs, government agencies, and nonprofits. There's no classroom component. Students work with their faculty advisors, typically in a full-time immersion, whether working on a problem situated here in our own city of Worcester or at one of more than 50 locations around the globe where we tackle local problems when it's not during a pandemic. Then in the fourth year, students complete another 9-credit-hour project, this time in their major. It might involve research in a faculty laboratory, or maybe designing some device or process for a corporate sponsor. Again, students work under the direction of a faculty advisor. Beyond that, projects also occur in many, if not most, of the courses students take across their degree programs. Not because it's required of students or faculty, but because the WPI faculty have concluded that project-based learning is a powerful approach to learning, and our students come to expect and enjoy project work. So all of our students have multiple PBL experiences in and out of the major and across all 4 years, and all of our faculty engage with PBL in some form.
Thanks, Rick. I'd imagine that faculty new to WPI are also new to project-based learning. What does your campus do to help newer faculty engage students in that way?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, historically, our strategy has been mentoring for the most part. New faculty commonly co-advise projects with more experienced faculty in something like an apprenticeship. The projects that all our students do in the 3rd and 4th years are supervised similarly to how graduate study has traditionally been overseen. That is, that students and faculty agree to work together and meet periodically to discuss goals and progress. So it's easy to add a second faculty advisor into an existing project. Most faculty find this type of co-advising enjoyable and beneficial, to the point where most of us continue to co-advise projects throughout our careers. We learn a lot from each other, and the students get the benefit of multiple viewpoints. In the last few decades, though, we've added more intentional forms of PBL faculty development for our newer colleagues. Most new faculty participate in a faculty mentoring program that extends across the first year. Our Center for Project-Based Learning offers day-long project-based learning workshops aimed at newer faculty, and our Morgan Teaching and Learning Center offers workshops and seminars throughout the year, many of which focus on project work. Perhaps the most successful model we have for working with new faculty is in our interdisciplinary 1st and 3rd year projects, both of which are typically co-taught. A community of practice has formed among these folks, all of whom are trying to do similar things educationally. We regularly meet to share ideas, strategies, materials, and resources. Faculty from every department on campus get involved in these projects in one way or another, and a lot of sharing of successful practices happens. It's important for us to keep new faculty engaged with PBL successfully, since project-based learning in one form or another is expected of all faculty. It's defined as part of our teaching responsibilities and evaluated during tenure and promotion processes. But more importantly, it helps them to become better educators.
Are there specific offices or organizations at Worcester to support aspects of project-based learning? And who finds all these projects for students to do?
Well, as you can imagine, it takes a lot of work to develop the relationships with organizations and identify those projects. And the approach that we take is to distribute it across the faculty. I'd say about 1/4 of our faculty are active in finding project sponsors. And as you might guess, during a pandemic, this is all happening very differently than it would when our students were able to travel around the world to work in different communities. But in a typical year, we have over 1,000 students and nearly 100 faculty leaving our campus to complete third or fourth year projects somewhere. So as you might imagine, we have a global projects office to support the logistics and well-being and risk management for those experiences. But beyond that, we've got a lot of other professional staff that play roles in project-based learning. From the first year onward, the research librarians are very involved with our students, supporting faculty and helping students develop information literacy and research strategies. Our Academic Technology Center supports students looking to develop presentations or videos or make posters about their projects. Our Student Development and Counseling Center plays an instrumental role in helping students develop the teamwork and leadership abilities that are so important in group-based projects. And our new Suite Center focuses specifically on supporting equitable and inclusive student teamwork. In each case, these professional staff are working closely with the faculty. So good project-based learning in our experience opens the door to partnerships all across campus.
What about students? Are there strategies WPI has found successful to support students as they do project work?
Faculty have to gauge how much support students need in project work. First-year students may require a great deal of support and structure, whereas students in a senior capstone may benefit from more autonomy. At all levels, though, the area where students are most likely to need support is teamwork. Faculty need to give thought to team formation, accountability, and evaluation. We've learned a lot about teamwork from our colleagues in student life, and we try to detect teamwork problems early enough so there's time to address them. Some of the most pervasive problems we've found stem from conflict avoidance and from certain students being marginalized in group settings. We often use advanced undergraduate students as peer learning assistants to help support student project teams. They can be very effective as coaches and mentors for students at earlier stages in the program. Similarly, our Writing Center is staffed by students who've been trained as writing tutors to help with project-based writing tasks. Those types of peer tutoring arrangements benefit both the learners and the tutors while taking some of the work off the shoulders of the faculty. They also help build a student culture that embraces project work.
What strategies do you see helping other colleges and universities encourage and support project-based learning?
Well, at every college and university we've worked with, we've found faculty who've been experimenting with project-based learning, sometimes for years. I think it's important to recognize and reward those early adopters. They've learned how to make PBL possible within the culture and context of their institution, and they can be an inspiration to their colleague. Very often they're unaware that other faculty around the institution are engaged in similar work. So getting these folks together for some professional development discussions is a great early step. First, they can learn from each other what each other is doing. And second, sharing some resources and expertise with them can really help to make their efforts more successful. And third, you might identify some potential leaders for your initiatives. And fourth, maybe most importantly, you can start building a community around project-based learning. So if you can find a mechanism for bringing folks together around PBL on a regular basis, even if it's just once per semester, that can go a long way. Encourage faculty to bring interested colleagues along. Communities of practice can form in those sort of voluntary and organic ways. Of course, if you provide a little structure and maybe some refreshments, you can get even more done. And if you have resources to support course redesign and other efforts, all the better. Another strategy is to make good PBL work public, preferably through the work products and accomplishments of the students involved. Have an annual PBL showcase where folks from around campus can see what students are creating through their project work. To the extent possible, celebrate student success and elevate faculty accomplishments. Assessment is important too. PBL can generate exciting evidence of student learning, and it can also present new challenges with respect to teamwork and evaluation. Learn what's working and what's not. Use that knowledge to enhance student learning. And finally, think about the faculty reward system. Engaging with high impact practices like PBL requires effort and courage. It can bring students out of their comfort zones in ways that can show up in course evaluations. So consider how your institution might support faculty who are experimenting with pedagogies like PBL that have been shown to enhance student learning and growth.
Great. Thanks so much, Rick. Appreciate that. So let's move on to our guest today, starting with Kim Filer at Virginia Tech. Hi, Kim. Would you like to show us the lay of the land in Blacksburg vis-a-vis project-based learning?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me today. As Mike mentioned, I am the Associate Vice Provost at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. We also have a few satellite campuses in Northern Virginia as well as Roanoke, Virginia. But we are primarily located in Blacksburg. Just to let you know, I mean, our focus of our PBL efforts always have to be about bringing our projects and our learning to scale. We have over 35,000 students. We're tipping the scale right now, right at about 30,000 undergraduates. We are a land grant institution in the Commonwealth, and we are comprehensive. So although we have strong grounding in both engineering and our business schools, we also have the full breadth of liberal arts majors, traditional science majors, as well as our agricultural groundings. So 70% of our students are in-state, 30% are out of state and international, and we have 280 majors across 8 colleges. So that gives you a little background that every time we think about any sort of innovation on campus, first, it's important for all of our students to engage and have those opportunities, but we're always thinking about how we can do that at scale. Another important thing to think about Virginia Tech is being a Research One institution. We also try to leverage research in a way that it can also enhance the projects that we're bringing to students. Next slide, please. There are 3 main characteristics of our undergraduate experience we feel make Virginia Tech a unique place for our students to study. And the first is our motto, which at many institutions, I think students learn mottos, they're brought into that, but believe it or not, for us, it's an underlying assumption and driver of the way we actually choose to engage both our students and our research. And that is, our motto is ut prosim, that I may serve. We take ut prosim very seriously at Virginia Tech, and ut prosim means that anytime we engage in something, we want to use our talents, skills, and abilities in service to our community, in service to the state, and in service to the world. And that is always embodied in everything we talk about at Virginia Tech. The other characteristic is we have a fairly new general education curriculum that really is focusing on the breadth of knowledge that we hope students explore. But then, of course, we have a lot of technical degrees as well as many disciplinary research areas. So there's a depth of learning as well. And then the last characteristic that actually is part of our culture, but PBL is a really important piece of, is experiential learning across the undergraduate degree. And this is both part of our culture, but also part of our aspiration, because one thing we know is you're never finished. You're never finished developing and improving and thinking about how can we even enhance the education beyond what we're offering. So experiential learning, a couple decades ago, we adopted sort of a way of thinking about designing curriculum that's called hands-on, minds-on. So we want hands-on, minds-on learning for all of our students. And that actually started really thinking through how we were going to bring PBL all the time into the classroom. And it's really become sort of a feature of a lot of undergraduate courses. But what we're really working on now is to think about how does experiential learning go from when students transition to a university through projects and through challenging for our students and some authentic experiences, all the way up to our students actually having experiential learning opportunities outside of the classroom, but integrated into our degrees. This is a feature for many of our degrees, but we're continuing to develop those along the way. And we see PBL as a very important source for student preparation and learning to be ready to transition into those other contexts. Next slide. So just to give you a little a sense of space of where we are, because we do a lot of PBL already. we really are trying to think about how does PBL become not just part of a few courses or a few opportunities, but really become part of the whole, a holistic opportunity for learning for our students. And so we have a lot of PBL going on, and I'm sure many institutions who are watching may have this as well in our disciplinary depth courses. So almost all of our degrees have capstone opportunities, and we have things like in our history department, our students have a topic, they each write a chapter, and then the class produces a book in that area. In our engineering fields, if I were to, they have a senior design course where we actually have clients who come in and the students design and attack a problem and actually design, not only design something, but then make that product and then show it back to a client. So we have that history and a lot of hard work by faculty that these are a really important piece of our curriculum. But where we are now is we've started thinking about, well, where else does this need to happen? Should this be happening in our general education classes? How can this happen in an interdisciplinary space? And so, like I said, we had a lot going on, but for the past 2 summers, actually it's almost three now, we sent independent teams to WPI's Project-Based Learning Institute in the summer. And both teams from 2 different colleges, an architecture and design team and then an electrical engineering team, came back and said, we've been doing projects, but we were missing some really important characteristics and parts. We learned so much. And that really had us thinking that, okay, we sent 2 teams, they learned a lot, but are we actually spreading sort of the good word of project-based learning and best practices across our campus? So what we started to think about is, what should our goals be? What should our goals be as a Center for Teaching and Learning to help support faculty who want to start rethinking or adjusting their projects and then growing where we're doing these projects? And so what we did was we reached out to WPI and said, could we bring the Institute to our campus? Because we feel like we need a larger community engaging in these conversations. And so last year over spring break, we brought WPI's team to our campus, and we had 6 different teams from different disciplines engage for a week and develop action plans so that they could start implementing some of the best practices, some in existing projects, some in redesigned projects, and some in new spaces. So what we found is the faculty ended that experience and said, you know, we need a bigger community. Just like Rick was saying, we really need a learning community. And so those faculty, some of them applied for innovation grants from our center, fairly small grants to support faculty. We also have a workshop and a showcase happening in 2 weeks with those teams to show where they are. And then we're going to have another institute again in spring, and we're hoping to continue to grow this community in many different ways, because we think that faculty having some time to work with faculty from other disciplines even makes this a stronger, scalable project. So here's some of our successes. One of our large teams was an interdisciplinary design team out of engineering. And all of our engineering senior designs are very project-based, but they're disciplinary only. They're only for students in that discipline. And of course, what many of us are noticing is the complex problems coming from our world don't center in one discipline. And so we have a team that actually started in March, planned through the pandemic, and launched their course in August. And it's an interdisciplinary group that's working on health sciences, partnered with robotics, and they're students are helping to build prosthetics and robotics for in the healthcare industry. So that's actually started this fall. Then we also had this fascinating thing happen where we had one of our campus leaders attended the Institute, and they actually took the Institute structure and used that structure to create a week-long workshop for all of their faculty in their college to get ready to teach virtually in the fall and in hybrid. So they actually used the model of project-based learning and faculty learning and used that same model and used it to implement change for the fall. So that was one, they truly said it, had they not gone through the Institute, they wouldn't have had a framework by which to get so many faculty together and have them work around some common principles. So thought I would share that because you never quite know where great professional development opportunities might support teaching and learning later. So.
Great, thanks, Kim. And thanks to Rick's cat for making a cameo. I'm a news guy, so I'm going to jump right to a question. We're going to do a little Q&A here about about COVID-19. How has the pandemic impacted project-based learning at Virginia Tech?
Yeah, so I probably should talk a little bit about Virginia and where we came. So we actually, believe it or not, during PBL Institute on the third day, we got notice at lunchtime that we were going home. The faculty stayed for one extra day. They toughed it out. They got their action plans, but we immediately were all locked down. We were home. And we have two answers to that question. We have faculty that were engaged in project-based learning in the full lockdown phase. We had some really interesting projects. We had an amazing project going on around the women's suffrage movement. And what the faculty member decided to do is the students couldn't do projects. So the students designed an interactive website that then they shared with others. Our chemistry group that was at the Institute is trying to bring in undergraduate research principles to their earlier classes. They had students doing demos, video demos for high school and K-12 students. So we had to shift fully online. Now, when we started thinking about fall, we have some face-to-face classes, some hybrid classes, and a lot of fully online classes. The university put an emphasis that our project-based classes and experiential learning framed classes should be the ones that we try to have as much face-to-face time as possible. I have a colleague in undergraduate academic affairs, Jill Seibel. She ran communities for the lab faculty as well as some of the project faculty to think about how you can split a curriculum and have some students in a group working online while some are face-to-face. So the faculty spent a lot of time thinking through how they could do that. So that's the overall structure. Some of our faculty decided to put projects fully online. Many are still having students to come into the labs or the machine shops or wherever they are, they have to do these projects, but do that in a safe way. So all of our labs have been modified with PPE to make sure our students stay safe.
Okay, just generally, extent of COVID-19, what are some of the main challenges you've faced as you've tried to get project-based learning, up and throughout the curriculum?
There's a couple of things. One is we have many classes with very large enrollments. Faculty have to be very creative about how to help students learn to not be passive learners in those environments and learn how to work together and form groups so that when class is over and students are working on projects, they have a team environment. So the idea of how to build team in a large enrollment course is always a challenge. One of the other big challenges we have is when you're at an institution as large as ours, a lot of our funding happens in departments. So in the natural project spaces, you have a lot of authentic interdisciplinary projects that come your way, and how to have some funding support for which students from very different disciplinary perspectives can work together and solve these problems can be a challenge when most of our funding and teaching and our overall structures are disciplinary specific. So that's something we're always have to be creative about, finding those sources.
Right. Where do you hope to be in 5 years with all this?
I think where we want to be is we want to connect our areas of strength and fill in some of our gaps that we want to build from, so that our students, each student, every single one of those 30,000 students has a unique learning journey that starts with, let's get a great mindset about what learning really is when they enter, and we transition students in a way that they have meaningful projects from the beginning, all the way up to they're ready to go to an internship, to a lab, to undergraduate research, because they've developed skills to listen, to talk, to problem solve, to take different perspectives, to apply logic, so that when they walk into a placement and eventually, hopefully, a career, the next step, those students have those skills immediately. It's not something they have to develop over the first 5 years. And we have to do that with intention. We also have to do that with empowering departmental faculty to think about each student's unique learning journey. So I think that's where we are, which is we're trying to take all our little pieces of excellence and really enhance them so that students can be on a trajectory that helps them be where they need to be, with the types of skills we know students are going to need to solve pressing world problems.
Terrific, Kim. Thanks so much for that. Let's take our focus over to Miami-Dade College. Hi, Margaret Shippey. How are you?
Good, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Can you
great.
give us an overview of the college?
Absolutely. So let me tell you about our college and a little bit about the students that we serve. Miami-Dade College is a large Hispanic serving institution. We're located in South Florida. And in the last academic year, our college credit student population numbered over 80,000, and our non-credit student population numbered over 26,000. And I'm going to come back to that student population in the next slide. So we'll talk a little bit more about what they look like then. We are also an urban multi-campus college with 8 campuses and several outreach centers located throughout Miami-Dade Miami-Dade County. Under normal circumstances, the bulk of our courses are offered in a face-to-face or blended setting. And we do offer virtual classes. And as you can imagine, students are taking greater interest in our MDC online campus these days. We're part of the Florida College system, and we offer 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees, and college credit certificates. We are, among large post-secondary institutions, we are number 1 in associate degrees awarded to Hispanic students, and number 3 in associate degrees awarded to Black students. And we're number 1 in the Florida College system for industry certifications. So there's a few accolades we're proud of. Finally, we are an open access institution at the associate degree level. And on the next slide, we'll think a little bit about what that means regarding our use of PBL. So let's move on to that next slide. This is a lot of information about our student demographics. There's a lot here, but I'm really just going to focus in on a few of our students' traits that I think are relevant to our teaching and learning context, especially as it relates to PBL pedagogy. So let's start at the top. Just over a quarter of our students are not traditional college-age students, and just under a quarter have children or other dependents. And about half our students are first-generation college students, and about half are non-native English language speakers. Many of our students struggle to get by. 57% of them are low income and 44% live below the poverty level. We work with the nonprofit organization Single Stop to offer a lot of wraparound services for our students, including food pantries on campuses, and so because they need that kind of support. A large majority of our students work. Approximately a third of them work full-time or something close to it. And as a result of that and other demands on their time, 2/3 of our students take classes part-time, in order to be able to juggle their responsibilities. So I wanted to touch on these traits because these are the students that we carried in our minds and our hearts when we traveled up to WPI for the Institute on Project-Based Learning in the summers of 2017 and 2018. While there, our 2 teams of faculty and administrators became very excited about the potential that PBL has for our students and their learning, but we also knew that we needed to translate what PBL looked like to the MDC teaching and learning context. Our students arrived to college with varying academic backgrounds, and they arrived to class with competing demands on their time and mental bandwidth. And these demands are not always academic in nature. We are confident that PBL can be an effective pedagogical approach to support our students' learning, but we need to adapt it to our circumstances and theirs. We can move to the next slide. So what is Miami-Dade doing around PBL? We are taking an it takes a village approach when it comes to fostering and supporting interest in and use of PBL at the college. At the core of this approach right now is our PBL work group, and you see them in the center of the slide. The work group is co-chaired by two faculty members, and it consists of faculty from each of our 8 campuses, including 2 faculty librarians. The disciplines represented on the work group range from physics and astronomy to nursing to psychology to humanities. Also on the work group and very instrumental are administrative resource colleagues whose areas naturally align with and support PBL pedagogy. We have campus academic leaders like a chairperson and a faculty dean, as well as colleagues from college-wide academic support areas whose missions naturally dovetail with PBL. The village represented on this slide highlights many of the areas that serve on the work group or are involved in and support our efforts. For example, learning resources, our libraries, the Office of Changemaking Education and Social Innovation, and the Office of Learning and Program Evaluation. For our colleagues in many of these areas, PBL provides the how to their what. For example, our Institute for Civic Engagement and Democracy has a long history of working with faculty to empower students for lifelong civic engagement. And PBL offers faculty members a pedagogy for incorporating this objective and content into their course design in a well-informed and well-thought-out way. Last fall, we brought Rick Vaz from the Center for Project-Based Learning down to Miami-Dade for a 2-day train the trainer with the PBL work group members. Instead of simply training the group on PBL, we took a train the trainer approach. So he laid the foundation for them to be future in-house PBL trainers. After Rick left, one of the first things the group did was to write a definition of what PBL can look like at MDC, and outlined a suite of faculty development trainings that are being developed and delivered internally. By building and delivering this content in-house, we can make sure it is appropriate and relevant to the MDC teaching and learning context. It will be delivered by MDC, for MDC, with our students in mind.
So thank you, Margaret. Can we jump ahead and talk about a little bit of what the strategies MDC is using to support and promote public-based learning?
Sure. One strategy that's been very impactful is that it is in our strategic plan. So we can point to the strategic plan as a huge support for the work. Faculty are very much reassured that this is not something that's going to go away. Leadership is supportive of this and are so supportive of it that they've written it into as a strategic initiative. I think I already mentioned our It Takes a Village approach. We are trying to bring as many people to this table as possible. We all share the same desire and outcome, which is high quality teaching and learning. We're trying not to worry too much about what it's called, if it's undergraduate research, if it's PBL, if it's academic service learning. We're all going in the same direction, and we're not trying to compete with each other. We're just supporting each other and aligning where it's natural and effective. I think our strategy of marrying faculty expertise with institutional resources to build sustainable in-house professional development is going to prove effective long-term, so that we don't need to rely on external expertise. We have it in-house, and we can tap into this talent pool that we're cultivating right now. We're also at this point leveraging existing events, structures, and reward systems. Rick mentioned reward systems, so we're not creating new things. We're just filtering this into structures that already exist. For example, our faculty have FPD requirements for promotional purposes and maintenance of rank. And so by offering these workshops with FPD credit, they're incentivized to attend. And that is just part of the fabric of how we work around here. We have several standing annual events, and we're able to bring it to those events when appropriate. And reward systems such as we have an internal mini grant program, and PBL is one of the priorities. We have an endowed teaching chair program, so PBL can serve as a cornerstone to a proposal that faculty submit for that program. And we have a couple of alternative to promotion tracks, like an exception to graduate credit process. And PBL can be the focus of one of those proposals as well. So we're trying to work within structures and processes that already exist at the college.
Okay, great. Has COVID-19 forced you to change any of that? It sounds like you've got the machine was really rolling there. Have you had to, adjust?
It was rolling, and it's still rolling. But and I'm really happy to say that the work group didn't miss a beat. We flipped our meetings online. We met our goals for the academic year. They stayed very engaged and committed, despite all of the craziness that was going on around us at the time. The campuses have been very innovative about finding ways to virtually showcase their students' work. We do have campuses with some regular annual events around student work, and they're just finding other platforms to continue that virtually. Some of the faculty have struggled. They reported to me that they're struggling to find ways to continue their PBL, and we were sort of emerging, as a faculty work group and with our training. So the training is slowed down a little bit. We are offering our intro to PBL workshop this fall. We offered the first part last week, actually, and we had to put that online. We're adapting, and we're trying to catch up a little bit to see how we can keep going forward with PBL in a remote context if necessary.
Okay. Otherwise, what have been the main challenges, and where do you hope to be with project-based learning in the next 5 years?
So I think we struggle with some of the same challenges that you probably heard on a lot of these webinars about faculty and students being asked to step into new roles, redefined roles, and it can be a little uncomfortable for both of them. So there's nothing new there. Faculty usually express a concern about needing to cover their content and not knowing how they're going to cover their content, especially since some of our classes have external licensing tests that they need to have their students prepared for. So that requires some innovative thinking. But I think unique perhaps to Miami-Dade is our size, which I think really can be an asset and a challenge. Because of our size, we do have some great offices to work with. The learning resources area is great. We have this office for change-making education and social innovation, our Earth Ethics Institute. We have some really great partners in this work. The challenge for me, at least in trying to keep my fingers on the pulse of what's happening at the college is not being able to know everything about what's going everywhere. Not that I really need to, but it's great to be able to celebrate what's happening and connect people to resources, because they're not alone. As I said, there's a whole village out there for them.
Right. Well, thanks so much, Margaret. Really appreciate that. To bring Rick Voss back into the conversation, Rick, in your work with other institutions, are these experiences typical? What generalizations can you make about good implementation of project-based learning at the campus level?
Well, these are two wonderful examples from institutions that are very distinctive and that have very different missions and context. But when I think about the colleges and universities like Virginia Tech and Miami-Dade that are making a lot of progress on the systematic level, I see some commonalities. For one, there's a lot of grassroots effort that is grassroots activity from faculty who are eager to innovate and give students more authentic and relevant learning experiences. And second, there are sources of institutional support and professional development for that activity, as personified by our two speakers today. So the combination of bottom-up enthusiasm and top-down encouragement and support, I think, is the mixture for success.
Great. Is there a type of institution that's really made for this kind of learning?
Well, you know, in this webinar series, in addition to Virginia Tech and Miami-Dade, we've heard from Bellevue College, Colorado School of Mines, Texas A&M, and Wake Forest University. And despite their differences, these institutions have some common goals. They're looking to make general education more impactful and distinctive, for example, and they're looking to have better capstone experiences in the major. They're looking to increase student engagement. They're looking to increase engagement with their communities. I think it helps all of these institutions to have a Center for Teaching and Learning or some similar entity to provide a locus of support and encouragement and ideas for all of that.
So Worcester Polytechnic Institute has worked with over 150 institutions to support their PBL initiatives. What have you learned through all that work about supporting and sustaining project-based learning?
Well, most of the successful initiatives start on a small scale, driven by early adopters. So I think it's really important to support and encourage those activities and bring those early adopters together. Draw on support from the campus community, bringing in the librarians, the teaching and learning centers, the student life professionals, and so forth. In celebrating student work in public, encouraging pilots, doing a lot of assessment, a focus on improvement, all of the things that you need to try to build a community of practice, as both Kim and Margaret have been describing.
How has your work, dealing with all these other institutions affected how project-based learning is practiced at WPI?
Well, during our work trying to support a wide range of institutions, we've been able to unearth examples of PBL work being done across our campus that we were unaware of that could be of broad interest. So we're hoping to launch an internal faculty fellows program to support development of that work. And we've received thoughtful applications from colleagues all across the campus who want to contribute to our work and mission. The goal of this is to develop a bank of materials and strategies that can be useful across higher education.
Great, thanks again, Rick. Let's turn our show over to our audience, right? Let's see what kind of questions we have from the gallery here. Let's see. Are the workshops for faculty, I guess they're talking about it at WPI, for professional development available to teachers not teaching at WPI? Pretty obvious, yes.
Yes, yes. So the two primary ways that the Center for Project-Based Learning works with other campuses, one is that we have an institute every summer, which is typically about a 3-day experience where a team of faculty who are working on some particular goal come together with PBL experts to try to develop a campus action plan. And Virginia Tech and Miami-Dade have both sent multiple teams. The other is that we offer custom workshops for other campuses. Both Kim and Margaret described physical visits to those campuses, but during the time of the pandemic, we've been able to pivot and do some of those workshops online. So the answer is yes. We don't have any offerings to date that individual educators from different institutions would be able to participate in. We've been working with, we're trying to work with institutions at the institutional level.
Okay, great. By the way, audience, we have time for some more questions. So if you'd like to get more in, please ask away. Here's a good one. What evidence do you have that students' PBL educational experiences are superior to the experiences of students taking a more traditional curriculum? I'm thinking in terms of both skill development and dispositions. You mentioned teamwork as an example, which may be considered both a skill and a disposition. If you do have answers to this question, what data have you collected to come up with those answers?
Okay, well, these are great questions, and they're big questions. I'll give a fairly quick two-pronged answer. The first prong is that project-based learning falls into the category of high-impact practices, and the research that has been done over the last 20 or 30 years is nicely gathered together by the Association of American Colleges and Universities, and particularly in a monograph written by Professor George Koo that provides lots and lots of evidence that high impact practices have a greater educational benefit for students on average than traditional education, and that they are particularly beneficial to students who are traditionally underserved by higher education, such as students of color, first generation, and low income students. At the WPI level, we did an alumni study that generated a lot of evidence that students attributed both career success and personal growth to their project experiences. And I know that we'll be sending around a summary of this webinar that will be posted, and I'll make sure that I point you towards some of those references in that summary.
Okay, great. I have a question here about whether institutions that practice project-based learning link up with either their, I'm trying to interpret the question here, with their entrepreneurship programs, or maybe with entrepreneurial opportunities outside the college. Is there some linkage there that you've seen?
Yeah, there's certainly some linkage. I think that project work very often can provide a connection to entrepreneurial activities. We've worked with some business schools, such as the Rohrer Business College at Rowan University, that are trying to take a very PBL approach to the entrepreneurship training that they're giving their students. Certainly at WPI, there is a big connection between the senior design projects and the senior projects that our students do very often for corporate sponsors and their development of entrepreneurship skills. So I think it's a nice, it can be a nice component of PBL. It doesn't have to be.
And kind of an entree to students who might be interested in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone here is enthusiastic about the presentation, says this is great, and then asks a very good question. What kind of documentation do you keep to assess student success, as in grades? Also, I am curious as to what your agreements with external employers or organizations look like. Let's take the grade question first. What's the difference in assessing someone doing project-based learning as opposed to traditional learning?
I think that the assessment of project work, at least at WPI, is far more focused on formative assessment and improvement than it is on summative assessment and evaluation. Much in the same way that faculty work with graduate students on graduate research, faculty are working with students not so much to judge them, but to help them develop skills and abilities. And so I think that project-based learning can be a nice pivot away from students feeling that faculty are experts there to judge them, toward an environment in which faculty are coaches there to help them develop. At the end of the day, we still have to put a grade on the projects, but we try to use the projects to help wean students off the dependence on grades that so many of them have. Because after all, they're not really going to be getting grades out in their post-school life.
All right. And what about the agreements with employers or nonprofit?
We have some. When we work with corporations, typically they want to have agreements that make clear issues related to intellectual property. The vast majority of projects that we do with community-based organizations, and those are just done on an agreement. I was going to say a handshake, but we don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Question here about project management skills they're incredibly valued in the workplace or in the workforce. How much are they incorporated into the student faculty learning experiences at a project-based learning institution or one that practices?
Well, they're extremely important. I think they're a big part of the way that faculty scaffold project work. Faculty are much less in the position of being content experts, as I mentioned, and much more being coaches and mentors. And a big part of designing a project-based learning experience is developing processes that teach students how to manage projects.
Mhm.
I think one of the strongest findings from our alumni study was the extent to which alumni attributed their success in project management to their project-based experiences while they were students.
Okay, great. Here's a CPBL question. Could two institutions team up to send a team? The institute price could be a stretch for my school this year, but our friends across town have similar challenges. Any way to mesh the two?
Absolutely. I would say that as long as they could come up with some unifying elements of what they're trying to do, I think that would be very welcome.
Okay. What recommendations do you have for an institution that would want every entering student to have project-based learning experiences?
Well, I mean, I think we've touched on an awful lot of the things that are being done at Miami Dade and Virginia Tech and other places. I think if you're going to expect all students to do this, you need to get the faculty engaged and on board. And I think I think project-based learning can be very appealing to students, but you need to explain to them what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Right. Do you use project-based learning activities as mandatory for students' portfolio building? I guess the question there is more, is there a link between the portfolio building and the PBL activities?
So as an institution that's had lots of project work for all students and all faculty for 50 years, I think the word mandatory is a dangerous word. We don't try to tell faculty how to do project work, and we don't try to tell students how to leverage that work. Project-based learning activities develop the types of artifacts and documents that make a very powerful part of a student portfolio, but we haven't incorporated them as such. I don't know if either of the other institutions have something to say about that.
Kim, Margaret, anything to add there?
No,
Okay.
I know some faculty use portfolios, but it's not across the disciplines.
Okay. There's a compound question here. It's a very good one. Are there certain high impact practices that lend themselves particularly well to project-based learning? And the flip side of that question, which high impact practices have faculty struggled to format as project-based learning?
So if you're familiar with the standard list of 11 high impact practices that the Association of American Colleges and Universities has identified, it's been my experience that a well-designed project-based learning activity can integrate 4 or 5 of those 11 high-impact practices. It very often involves undergraduate research. It very often involves collaborative learning. It's very often writing intensive and so forth. I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So I like to think of project-based learning not as a high-impact practice so much as a vehicle for implementing numerous high-impact practices within a project assignment.
Okay. Grad student question. What is your experience in working across disciplines or departments with grad students?
We have had, we've worked with about 150 colleges and universities, and I would say that all but a couple were focused primarily at the undergraduate level. I think graduate work has, in most fields, has always had some element of project-based learning to it, with the exception of the collaboration. Graduate students are usually working alone. But we have worked with a number of schools that are trying to use elements of project-based learning to make their graduate curriculum more distinctive. I think it's a great fit.
All right. Okay, well, we have a few questions. Go ahead, Kim. I'm sorry.
I just want to add something that we've learned watching project-based learning try to happen across interdisciplinary teams of grad students. And that is what we have found is the more formal education a person has, sometimes the harder it is for them to equitably engage in interdisciplinary conversations. And so what I would recommend if you're going to do this, especially with graduate students, is take some time for graduate students to learn the lingo of other disciplines, and also time to respect the different perspectives that a humanities student might bring versus in our space, we have a lot of engineers, and when engineers are often presented with a problem, they immediately go to the engineering answer, right? And I actually believe it takes a little more time to get a team to both listen to and respect the disciplinary perspectives of the members. So I think building that time intentionally in is really important in a graduate setting. So I just thought I'd share that.
Fantastic, thanks. And thanks, Kim, thanks, Margaret, thanks, Rick, again, for all you've done. Thank you to our participants for being here. I wanted to end by drawing your eyes to this slide, if they're not already there. In the beginning of the year, there will be a takeaway report available in the three-part project-based learning webinar series in its entirety. Once available, it can be found at wpi.edu, etc., which you see in red here. In addition, to learn more about how to apply to the 2021 Institute on Project-Based Learning, visit the address you see there, and don't forget to sign up for the quarterly project-based learning newsletter at the newsletter address here. Thanks so much for being here, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.